The books were open today and we are going to look at what it all means. Now, two important people in the next few weeks joining us. Labor has ruled out putting up income taxes, including the top personal rate, if it wins power next month. This follows the opening of the government's books today, which showed the surplus for the year to June coming in a whopping $2.1 billion ahead of forecasts. But wait, there's less. That should be music to the ears of politicians on the campaign trail. But, and there's a big but, the forecast surplus growth tails off after that and is expected to be lower than estimates made in the May budget. National says that means there isn't room for further tax cuts, or not much anyway, beyond the package it's already announced. What other measures to boost family incomes until 2020? It's finance spokesperson Steven Joyce joins us now in the Wellington studio. No, you're on the phone. Are you there, Mr. Joyce?
Hello, John. How are you?
Yeah, good. How are you?
I'm well, mate. Very
good.
well.
You're good. Are you still well?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's...
Should I not be?
Well, let's make the assessment of where this leaves you. Does it change your approach to the election campaign, what you learned today when the books were open?
No, I don't think it does. I anticipated that probably the Treasury numbers would be a little softer because we had 6 months slightly softer growth from the December and March quarters, which means we're sort of a lower starting point. And it's still very respectable. We're talking 3% a year over the next 4 years on average versus 3.1, so we're not massively different. And what it means is there's a couple of changes. The unemployment rate is predicted to drop earlier to 4.3% by June in 3 years' time. And also the Treasury is now expecting stronger wage growth over that period as well. And
sorry, forgive me for interrupting. They are expecting stronger wage growth, but boy, that's off a low base. And it's still not high wage growth, is it?
Well, no, that's not correct. In terms of real wage growth, actually, New Zealand has been one of the better performing countries in the OECD over the last few years because our inflation has been so low, but wage growth has been not spectacular, nominal wage growth, but there has been some. And as a result, we're doing steadily better than, for example, the US or the UK and other countries like that.
Okay.
So if you actually have a look, I mean, it doesn't feel as much in your pocket because the inflation's been so low. Last year inflation was nil, so anything that anybody got extra in terms of extra hours worked or extra money actually flowed through in terms of increased spending power.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do with that big surplus in the short term?
Well, it's important, and you've pointed it out. It's a one-off, so it's literally $2.1 billion. So if you were to spend it and you wanted to, say, for example, create something that was recurring expenditure, which is how most of the operating expenditure does, you're talking about $300 million a year, which isn't a lot compared to some of the bigger ticket items that governments invest in. So from my perspective, it leaves us in roughly a similar situation. Our cash position, if you like, the cash you have after you've invested in the infrastructure is still about nil once we've gone through 3 years, so quite big surpluses. Then big investment in infrastructure means that the amount of cash available after that is actually quite low until 2020, which is why I've said we wouldn't do a second family incomes package until 2020 because we wouldn't want to be borrowing to do that.
Okay, and perversely, and forgive me for sounding impertinent in this question, does this play to the National Party's almost proud lack of imagination? Because
that's a bit unfair.
Well, hold on a sec.
Highly imaginative.
No, but aren't you talking about steady as she goes? Isn't that your pitch? Isn't the calm modulated?
Actually, I'd go further than that. We have a strong economic story. Last year we were the fifth fastest growing in the OECD.
Except let's look forward rather than looking back.
That's right.
If your surpluses had continued big, if your surpluses had continued at the level we're about to get for a longer term, you would have had to have done something with them, right? Now you can say, well, whoops-a-daisy, actually there's nothing we can do. Therefore, you can be excused action, can't you?
Well,
inaction.
Look, I mean, I'm sorry, John. There's not inaction when you're investing the largest amount in public services that's been invested for a long time, the largest extra health spend in 11 years, massive infrastructure spend, and supporting family incomes. And it's actually only by having a economy growing at 3%, and steadily at 3%, not just 1 year, that you're able to do those things all at once and get your debt tracked in. I would say, actually, with the greatest respect to you, actually it's one of the strongest performances in the OECD, and we're going to keep doing it.
Largest extra health spend is, of course, a numerical thing. You've increased it absolutely, but it's not enough. There's a sense that it's not enough. And
Well, no, it's more than a numerical thing. It's also a very big percentage increase. We are talking nearly $4 billion just from a month and a half ago, from July 1 this year, nearly $4 billion of additional money going into health over the next 4 years.
So why are DHBs struggling? Why are DHBs in deficit, which effectively means they don't have enough money to do what they want to do? And why do so many people contact us every time you or the Prime Minister are on the radio saying how good things are and say, we're doing it really tough? What's the disconnect?
Well, nobody's arguing that everybody's doing it the way they would want to do it, and that's why we're doing all those things. It's why the family incomes package comes in at 1 April next year. I've had all these interesting discussions because we're doing lots of these like the Business New Zealand session today, where other politicians say, families aren't getting enough, and then they rule out reducing the tax rates or shifting the tax thresholds, which is actually how you get money to families, is making sure that they keep more of what they earn. And that's what's important. From 1 April next year, because of the hard work of New Zealanders, we're able to do that. If you talk the public services and the health expenditure, again, very, very big investments in that. And in terms of the DHB deficits, it's a long story which we could get into, but a lot of that is actually what you call non-cash deficits. In other words, it's because of depreciation and those sorts of things. So we've got to be careful not to overplay that. It's significant, but in actual fact, the amount that's going into increased services is very, very significant.
Steven Joyce, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.